The pressure inside the Austin state capitol was so intense it felt like the air could snap. Texas Governor Greg Abbott sat behind his large wooden desk, his face flushed with frustration as he stared at Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett. What began as a basic talk about federal relief had quickly turned into one of the biggest political clashes in recent memory. The governor's office, usually a sign of power in Texas, had turned into a war zone. The huge Texas flag behind Abbott's chair seemed to add insult to injury. Here was the state's highest official, visibly upset at a fellow Texan who only came to support disaster victims. Abbott did not see the irony, but soon millions watching the video would. "Stay out of Texas," Abbott shouted, his hands slamming onto the desk so hard his coffee mug jumped. The sound echoed off the wood-paneled room like a loud snap, and for a brief moment, everything stood still.
Out.
The 35-year-old Democrat from Dallas did not move. Instead, she leaned forward with a calm smile that would make Abbott rethink every word he had just said. The cameras his team had quietly set up to trap Crockett were now recording a very different scene, a total outburst from one of the country's most influential governors. And the steady, well-planned reaction from a congresswoman who was about to make this moment count. What followed in the next 30 seconds left the Texas governor completely at a loss. It sparked a political storm that would ripple all the way to Washington, D.C. This was not just a fight over policy. It was a generational showdown. A clash between outdated power plays and modern, prepared leadership. Before we get into the heart of this intense moment, be sure to subscribe and turn on the bell icon so you never miss the bold political stories that are changing America. This is the kind of unfiltered, real-life politics that shows us what leaders are like when they think no one is watching. Crockett's reply was so sharp, so clearly delivered that within hours it had taken over the internet. Experts called it a textbook example of how to lead under pressure, and social media users turned it into the top political meme of the year. But to see why this moment hit so hard and how it would reshape both their careers, we have to look at where this wild confrontation began. On one side was Greg Abbott, 66-year-old Republican governor who had led Texas with a strong grip. For nearly 10 years, Abbott was not just another elected official. He was the wheelchair-bound conservative figurehead who had shaped Texas into a national red state. From his large border wall effort to his strict abortion laws, Abbott had made his name by never stepping back from a challenge, especially when facing Democrats from Washington. He controlled a $200 billion state budget, led the Texas National Guard, and had the authority to call lawmakers into special session whenever needed. He had challenged everyone from President Biden to California Governor Gavin Newsom and claimed victory every time. His office walls were lined with photos showing him signing conservative bills, meeting GOP leaders, and pushing back against what he called federal overreach. To him, no first-term congresswoman from Dallas was going to tell him how Texas should be run. Abbott had carefully built his public image as the ultimate tough Texan. Despite being paralyzed from a serious accident in his youth, he never allowed the public to view him as soft or helpless. Instead, he doubled down by being more forceful, more determined, and more ready for conflict than most Texas politicians. His supporters respected him for this, calling him a fighter and a solid conservative leader. On the other side was Jasmine Crockett, the 42-year-old civil rights lawyer turned congresswoman who had quickly made a name for herself in Washington. Unlike many in politics who avoid taking bold stances, Crockett built her platform on calling out power directly, no matter who it upset. She had gone viral several times for her bold statements on the House floor, but standing up to Greg Abbott on his own ground was a new kind of challenge. Crockett was not just another voice in Congress. She was a former prosecutor with years of experience handling tough cases in court. She knew how to stay focused in tense moments, how to use solid facts in her favor, and how to redirect her opponent's anger to her own advantage. Her background in law taught her that whoever loses their temper first often loses the argument. It was a lesson she remembered well. What made Crockett especially tough to beat was that she came across as real. She was not a lifelong politician prepped for office from day one. She was a practicing attorney who had witnessed unfair treatment firsthand and decided to do something about it. When she talked about serving people, it came from real-life experience, not from polished speeches or polling data. This was not just about two politicians disagreeing. Texas was facing a serious crisis that had captured national attention. The state's power grid had once again failed during a winter storm, leaving millions without electricity for several days. Residents were dying in care homes, families burned furniture to stay warm, and hospitals were relying on backup power. The suffering was immediate and widespread. Federal emergency funds were urgently needed, but Abbott was refusing them because they came with environmental guidelines he did not support. The federal government had offered billions in aid, but wanted Texas to commit to improving the power grid with more resilience and cleaner energy systems. Abbott saw this as a threat to Texas independence and a risk to the oil industry that had backed his political rise. To him, the strategy was clear: push back on Washington, shift the blame to the federal level, and rely on conservative frustration about government control to win another term. But what Abbott did not expect was Jasmine Crockett arriving prepared and ready to respond. At the same time, Crockett's district in Dallas was among the worst affected. Her community was literally freezing while Abbott treated it as a political calculation. She had received thousands of calls from concerned families, visited shelters filled with unhoused people, and witnessed the direct impact of Abbott's political stance. This was not just policy for her. These were people she lived among, people who counted on her to take action. She had asked for this meeting, hoping they could find a workable path forward, believing that sitting down might cut through the partisan divide. Maybe, she thought, if Abbott could see what families were going through, he might soften his stance. Maybe if she could explain how the federal funds would help Texans directly, he might change his mind. Some might call it naive, but Crockett still believed in the value of a real conversation between public officials who claimed to care about their state. Abbott, however, saw the meeting differently. To him, it was a moment to remind an outspoken congresswoman of her place, to show that Texas governors do not take instructions from Washington lawmakers, especially not from young black women representing districts he viewed as politically distant. The meeting was meant to be private, but Abbott's staff had secretly installed cameras, hoping to catch Crockett in a moment that would make her look like an outsider meddling in Texas matters. They did not realize they were about to record one of the most unexpected political turnarounds in recent memory. Abbott's communications director had pitched the idea as a perfect setup. They would invite Crockett to the governor's mansion, treat her with disrespect, try to get her upset or lose control on camera, then edit the footage to make her look emotional and unqualified. It was a familiar tactic meant to elevate Abbott's image while undermining hers. The plan looked foolproof. Abbott was on home ground, surrounded by his staff and the usual symbols of Texas leadership. Crockett would be alone, outnumbered, and expected to be thrown off by the formality. What could go wrong? Everything. Abbott's team had made a basic but serious mistake. They underestimated who they were dealing with. They looked at a young black congresswoman and assumed she would be easy to shake. They ignored the fact that she was a skilled attorney used to tough courtrooms, a political survivor from hard-fought campaigns, and a Texan herself who knew exactly how to stand up to pressure. All the elements were there for a political showdown. Abbott was riding the success of a recent legislative session where he had passed some of the strictest laws in the nation, felt unbeatable, especially in the center of his own political territory. Crockett, on the other hand, was in a difficult position, aware that if she failed to secure federal relief for her freezing community, her time in Congress could end almost as soon as it began. The irony was sharp. A powerful white male governor, controlling every lever of state power versus a black congresswoman from Dallas who was viewed by many as having little influence. Abbott was about to learn that underestimating Jasmine Crockett might be the worst political move he ever made. The moment had all the ingredients of a classic underdog story. Only this time, the underdog was not just brave, she was ready. Crockett had done her research, dug into Abbott's weak spots, and came fully prepared for the type of confrontation his team thought they were setting her up for. While they set up hidden cameras to catch her slip, she was planning to flip the narrative. Outside, the weather seemed to reflect the growing tension. Heavy clouds gathered over Austin, and weather reports warned of another possible winter storm. No one missed the message. As elected leaders postured in well-heated rooms, Texans were bracing for more cold nights and uncertainty their government still had not addressed. The tension was clear from the moment Crockett stepped into Abbott's office. The governor did not bother to stand and greet her, a clear sign of disrespect that his staff later admitted was intentional. Instead, he motioned toward a chair placed far from his desk, forcing Crockett to lean forward to meet his gaze. "Congresswoman Crockett," Abbott said with a controlled smile, "I understand you want to talk about federal aid for the recent weather disaster." "That is correct," Governor Crockett replied, her voice calm despite the clear tension in the room. "People in my district in Dallas are struggling. They need support, and the federal government is ready to step in." Abbott's face changed quickly. "Your district? As far as I know, they are Texans first, and Texans take care of their own. We do not need Washington stepping in, especially when conditions are attached." The first red flag came when Abbott began lecturing Crockett about Texas independence, as though she had not been born and raised in the state herself. He spoke of the Alamo, the state's independent spirit, and how people from outside Texas simply do not get the Lone Star mindset. Crockett gently interrupted. "With all due respect, I was born in Austin. I grew up here. I went to law school. At UT, I know Texas very well." That was when Abbott's well-known anger started to surface. His tone grew sharper, his movements more animated. He began questioning whether Crockett truly stood for Texas's values or if she was just another liberal Democrat elected in a district drawn to favor her side. "You may have been born here," Abbott said, his voice thick with sarcasm, "but you do not speak for real Texas. You push the far-left agenda that is trying to tear down everything we have built." Crockett stayed composed, but viewers could see determination in her eyes. "Governor, I represent 760,000 Texans who voted for me to fight for them. Right now, they need federal disaster relief, and you are standing in the way because of politics." "Politics?" Abbott's voice grew louder. "I am defending Texas against federal control. I am protecting states' rights, something you clearly do not respect." Abbott's aides exchanged uneasy glances. They had seen him upset before, but this was different. He was taking this personally, and the tension in the room was obvious. Abbott started pointing to Crockett's record, criticizing her for supporting federal programs he strongly opposed. He questioned her loyalty to Texas and suggested she cared more about headlines than about real solutions. "You show up from Washington," Abbott went on, his wheelchair creaking as he leaned forward, "thinking you can come here and tell me how to lead my own state. Well, let me explain something about Texas, Congresswoman." But Crockett was not stepping back. "Governor, with respect, I did not come here from Washington. I came from Dallas, my district, where people are still without power because the grid you keep promoting failed again." That hit a sensitive spot. Abbott's energy grid was his most vulnerable issue, the one problem that could damage him politically, and Crockett had just brought it front and center. Abbott's face was turning a deeper shade of red. His staff later admitted they had never seen him this furious, not even during his toughest sessions with lawmakers. He began questioning if Crockett understood the Constitution, whether she valued federalism, and whether she deserved her seat in Congress. "Maybe," Abbott said, his voice sharp, "if you spent less time on Twitter and more time reading the Constitution, you would understand why Texas does not need to be lectured by new Congress members who think they know more than governors with years of experience." Crockett's reply was calm but clear. "Governor, I have read the Constitution many times. I have also read the emergency relief bill that could help the people I represent. Have you?" The remark was subtle but powerful. Abbott took pride in his legal skills. Before he was governor, he served as attorney general. Questioning whether he had read the legislation was like challenging his very foundation. Abbott's hands were now clenched on the sides of his wheelchair, his knuckles tight and pale. His team could tell he was about to lose control, but there was nothing they could do to prevent it. The man who built his image on strength and discipline was on the verge of a breakdown in tape. His chief of staff locked eyes with the communications director, both realizing their plan was collapsing. In real time, they had seen Abbott lose his cool before, but this was something else. This was personal, and emotional outbursts rarely play well in politics. "I have had enough of this," Abbott said, his jaw clenched. "I am tired of Washington Democrats coming to Texas, telling us what to do. I am tired of people like you." The silence that followed felt endless. Everyone in the room sensed something major was about to happen, a moment that would mark this showdown and likely shape both of their political futures. Then came the words that would define it all: "Stay out of Texas." Abbott's voice echoed through the room with so much force that his coffee mug tipped over and crashed to the floor. His face was flushed with anger, his finger extended straight at Crockett, as if casting her out of the state. For a brief moment, the room froze. Abbott's staff did not move, stunned by what their boss had just done. The cameras they had placed to corner Crockett were now recording Abbott's meltdown in crystal clear detail. But Jasmine Crockett did not appear rattled or uncomfortable. Instead, she leaned back slightly in her seat and smiled, the kind of smile that should have warned Abbott he had just made a serious mistake. "Stay out of Texas," Crockett repeated. His words, her tone steady and controlled. "Governor, I believe you are misunderstanding something very basic." Abbott was still catching his breath, believing he had just delivered a powerful blow. He had used his signature line, the one that usually worked to silence outsiders. His chest moved heavily from the effort of his outburst. Sweat had formed on his forehead despite the air-conditioned room. For a brief moment, he looked pleased, like a fighter who thought the match was over in his favor. The quiet in the room was tense and loud. Abbott's team stood motionless, as if even making a sound might make things worse. The cameras still recording were unknowingly capturing not a victory, but what would become a political disaster. But Crockett was not done, in fact. She was only getting started. Her background as a lawyer had taught her that the most effective counter comes after your opponent believes they have already won. "Governor," she said, "I did not come to Texas. I have never left Texas." She reached into her pocket, pulled out her phone, and raised it slowly and clearly. "Would you like to see my birth certificate? Born in Austin, Texas, raised in Texas, went to school in Texas, elected by Texans." Abbott's face started to pale as he began to see where this was headed. Years of political experience were suddenly telling him that he had badly miscalculated. But by then, it was too late. The words "stay out of Texas" were already spoken, already being recorded, already becoming a moment that could define his entire time as governor. But here's the thing. Governor Crockett went on, her confidence growing word by word. She now sounded like a lawyer who had just caught someone lying in court. "You told me to stay out of Texas, yet you are the one who has been pushing Texas away from the rest of the country. You have spent your years in office blocking federal programs meant to help Texans. You turned down Medicaid expansion that could have given health care to over 1.4 million people. You have sued the federal government more than 100 times, fighting against policies that support Texas families." Abbott tried to jump in, but Crockett was not slowing down. "You want to talk about staying out of Texas? Then stay out of Texas women's health care choices. Stay out of Texas schools where you are banning books. Stay out of the private lives of Texas families." Each sentence struck hard. Abbott's staff could see him struggling to come up with a reply, but Crockett was not giving him an opening. "But do you know what really gets to me, Governor?" Crockett said, pulling a folder from her briefcase. "You want to talk about who really does not belong here? Let's talk about your campaign donors." Abbott's eyes widened. This was not what he expected. The meeting was meant to focus on federal aid, not his campaign contributors. "According to your recent financial disclosures," Crockett continued, scanning the documents, 67% of your top donors are not from Texas. They are based in New York, California, Florida, anywhere but here." The room fell completely quiet. Abbott's staff knew she was right, but they never thought someone would say it out loud. "So when you accept millions from oil companies in Oklahoma, gas firms in Louisiana, and hedge funds in New York, do you ask them to stay out of Texas too? Or is that just reserved for officials who were actually born here?" Abbott was stammering, grasping for a response. But Crockett was not finished. "You know what, Governor? I think I see the real issue now. You are not upset because I am involved in Texas matters. You are upset because I am doing the work you have refused to do, standing up for Texans, not working against them. She stood slowly, gathering her notes with care. I came here today to support Texas families struggling because of your policy failures. Your reply was to tell me to leave my own home state. But here's the truth, Governor. I am not going anywhere. Texans chose me to represent them, and that is exactly what I will keep doing. Abbott made one last effort to push back. You cannot speak to me like that. I am the governor of Texas. Crockett paused at the door, then turned around with that same composed smile. Yes, you are the governor, and I am a member of the United States Congress. The difference is, I remember that I answer to the people, not the other way around. The door clicked shut behind her. Abbott sat motionless, his team unsure where to look. No one said anything for nearly a full minute. He stared at the door she had just walked out of, his mouth slightly open, clearly still processing the moment. His chief of staff finally spoke. Governor, should we release that video? Abbott turned sharply. What video? The footage we recorded to show her as someone interfering in Texas politics. Another long silence. Abbott looked at the cameras, then at his aides, then at the dark coffee mark on the carpet from his fallen mug. Turn them off, he said softly. Turn them all off. But by then, it was too late. The damage had been done, and very soon, the entire world would witness what happened when Greg Abbott told Jasmine Crockett to stay out of Texas. 3 hours after it ended, someone in Abbott's office made a decision that would change both of their careers forever. They leaked the video. It first appeared on a random Twitter account, then spread quickly across all social media. Within an hour, Stay Out of Texas was trending across the country, but not the way Abbott had expected. Rather than supporting him, people were using it to make fun of him. The clip had been edited to emphasize Abbott's outburst in Crockett's calm, cutting reply, making the governor seem like an out-of-control bully who got taken down by a composed, prepared congresswoman. The most shared part was a 30-second highlight reel that began with Abbott shouting, "Stay out of Texas," and ended with Crockett's statement about working for the people. It reached 5 million views within just 6 hours. Twitter was the first to catch on. Progressive users quickly shared the video with captions like, "This is what happens when a bully meets someone who pushes back." And Jasmine Crockett just showed everyone how to deal with GOP bullies. But the unexpected part was how many conservative Texans also backed Crockett. One popular tweet from a Republican voter in Houston read, "I do not agree with everything Crockett says, but she is right about one thing. She is more of a Texan than Abbott's out-of-state donors." Memes started popping up almost instantly. Someone made a GIF of Abbott's coffee mug falling with the caption, "When you realize you picked the wrong congresswoman?" Another meme showed Crockett calmly picking up her papers with the words, "That is how you deal with a tantrum." TikTok users were even more imaginative. One video set to intense background music showcased Crockett's strongest lines and reached 12 million views overnight. Young viewers, many unfamiliar with either politician, started reposting it and calling Crockett a rising political star. By the next morning, every major news outlet was covering the story. CNN's headline said, "Texas governor's meltdown backfires in a big way." Fox News tried to stand by Abbott, but even their anchors looked uneasy. MSNBC's morning show played the full exchange 3 times, with host Joy Reid calling it one of the toughest political comebacks I have ever seen. The New York Times ran a front-page piece titled, "Stay Out of Texas Backfired," breaking down how Abbott's effort to look tough had made him seem unhinged and weak. But the most damaging stories came from Texas publications. The Dallas Morning News, which had mostly stayed neutral on Abbott before, published an editorial criticizing his actions as unworthy of a governor and praising Crockett for showing the kind of leadership Texans need. The Houston Chronicle went even further, saying Abbott had humiliated the state he was elected to serve, while Crockett had reminded Texans what real state values are all about. Abbott's team tried everything to regain control of the story. They leaked the video. It first appeared on an unknown Twitter account, then quickly spread across all major social platforms. Within an hour, Stay Out of Texas was trending nationwide, but not in the way Abbott had intended. Instead of backing the governor, Texans used the phrase to criticize him. The footage had been edited to emphasize Abbott's breakdown and Crockett's composed comeback, making the governor appear like an aggressive figure who got calmly dismantled by a prepared congresswoman. Most shared clip was a 30-second edit, starting with Abbott shouting, "Stay out of Texas," and ending with Crockett reminding him that she represents the people. It racked up 5 million views in just 6 hours. Twitter was the first place it went viral. Progressive users quickly reposted the video with captions such as, "This is what happens when a bully meets someone who knows how to stand up," and Jasmine Crockett just showed how to take on GOP aggression. But what no one expected was the number of conservatives in Texas who also defended Crockett. One widely shared post from a Republican in Houston read, "I may not agree with everything Crockett says, but she is definitely more Texan than Abbott's out-of-state donors." Then came the memes. Someone made a gif of Abbott's coffee mug tipping over, captioned, "When you realize you picked the wrong fight." Another image showed Crockett calmly packing up her papers with the text, "This is how you respond to a meltdown." On TikTok, the creativity took off. A montage of Crockett's sharpest moments set to music received 12 million views overnight. Young viewers, many of whom had never heard of either politician, were now reposting clips and calling Crockett a political icon. By morning, every major news outlet had picked up the story. CNN's headline read, "Texas governor's outburst backfires." Fox News tried to spin it in Abbott's favor, but even their anchor seemed unsure of how to explain his reaction. MSNBC aired the full video 3 times, with host Joy Reid calling it one of the sharpest political comebacks in recent memory. The New York Times ran a front-page story titled, "When Stay Out of Texas Went Wrong," breaking down how Abbott's attempt to appear firm ended up making him look unsteady and emotional. But the harshest responses came from local papers in Texas. The Dallas Morning News, which had never taken a clear side on Abbott, published an editorial criticizing his conduct and praising Crockett for showing real leadership. The Houston Chronicle was even more direct, writing that Abbott had embarrassed the state and that Crockett reminded Texans what their values truly are. Abbott's team tried multiple ways to control the story. They released a statement saying the clip was taken out of context and the governor was defending Texas values, but the complete footage made that hard to believe. Viewers could see what had happened. Abbott attempted to tweet through the backlash, "I will always stand up to federal interference, no matter who disagrees." But the post backfired as thousands of Texans replied with versions of "Crockett is from Texas. Genius." His staff arranged friendly interviews on conservative radio. But even those hosts asked him why he had lost his temper with a fellow Texan trying to help people impacted by the storm. The lowest point came during a press conference where Abbott tried to speak about unrelated topics. But every reporter focused on the exchange with Crockett. By the 5th question about the "Stay Out of Texas" comment, he ended the event early, adding to the perception that he was shaken. While Abbott scrambled to manage the fallout, Crockett was enjoying the strongest week of her career. Her office received dozens of interview requests from national news organizations. Speaking invitations arrived from across the country. Her first big interview was on CNN with Anderson Cooper, where she remained as calm and direct as she had been in the governor's office. "Anderson," she said, "I went to Austin to try to help struggling Texas families." The governor responded with anger. "That tells you a lot about how we each approach public service." When asked if she regretted any part of the situation, Crockett's answer went viral once again. "I only regret that it took public pressure to get the governor to accept federal disaster aid. Sometimes you have to speak directly to power, even when it does not want to hear the truth." Exchange had quick political consequences. Within a week, Abbott quietly reversed course and agreed to accept the federal aid, including the environmental rules he had earlier rejected. His team claimed that had always been the intention, but it was clear Crockett had forced the shift. Even more significantly, the event changed how both leaders were viewed. Abbott, who had built a reputation as a strong conservative figure, now looked defensive and easily provoked. Crockett, on the other hand, was being talked about as a potential Democratic frontrunner for a statewide position in Texas. Democratic fundraising campaigns featuring the incident brought in millions in small donations. Meanwhile, some Republican contributors began questioning whether Abbott was still the best person to lead the state. Political analysts quickly saw this moment as a possible shift in Texas politics. For years, Abbott had stayed in control by presenting himself as the one protecting Texas from outside forces, but Crockett turned that idea on its head, making Abbott appear like the one tied more to donors from other states than to Texas communities. The exchange also exposed a deeper generational divide in Texas leadership. Abbott stood for the older group of Texas Republicans, mostly older, white, and increasingly disconnected from the state's evolving population. Crockett, on the other hand, symbolized a younger and more diverse Texas. Frustrated with leaders who focus more on political drama than real solutions, just days after the video went viral, Crockett started getting calls from top Democratic leaders. Nancy Pelosi's office reached out to arrange a meeting. Chuck Schumer invited her to speak at a fundraiser in New York. Most notably, people close to President Biden said the White House admired how she stayed composed under pressure. There were discussions about having her join key administration events and possibly backing her if she chose to run for a higher office in Texas. For Abbott, the incident became a major part of his time as governor, but not in a positive way. Political cartoonists wasted no time showing the governor in a wheelchair, tossing coffee mugs while Crockett calmly jotted down notes. Late-night shows joked about politicians telling native Texans to stay out of Texas. On a more serious note, the moment damaged Abbott's carefully built image as a capable and steady leader. If he lost control during a standard meeting with a congresswoman, many wondered if he could handle an actual crisis. Polls showed his approval ratings starting to slip for the first time in years, especially among suburban women and younger voters who saw his actions as aggressive and not fitting of a leader. The Abbott-Crockett incident became more than just political news, turned into a sign of changing power in American politics. For too long, leaders like Abbott had used loud voices and pressure to overpower others. But Crockett proved that this old strategy does not work on leaders who are steady, focused, and willing to push back. The video began appearing in political science classes as an example of how to deal with difficult situations in public service. Communication experts studied Crockett's approach, remaining calm, using facts instead of getting emotional, and redirecting the other person's energy. Most political experts agreed this was a possible turning point in Texas politics. The state had leaned firmly Republican for decades, but shifting demographics and Abbott's own political missteps were opening the door for Democrats. Crockett's strong showing demonstrated that Democrats could hold their ground in Texas by being prepared, firm, and genuinely Texan. She did not attempt to outdo Abbott on conservative credentials. Instead, she showed a deeper connection to Texas values, supporting your community and standing up to intimidation. One of the most unexpected results of the whole exchange was that Abbott's effort to embarrass Crockett had the opposite effect. His team had set up cameras to catch her looking unprepared or uncomfortable, but they ended up capturing one of the most remarkable political moments in recent years. The video quickly found its way into political science courses across the country. Instructors used it to show students how to manage tense encounters, communicate clearly in pressure situations, and avoid making assumptions about opponents. Experts in communications studied Crockett's approach, pointing out how she stayed focused, presented facts with intent, and used Abbott's hostility to strengthen her own position. Meanwhile, Abbott's "Stay out of Texas" comment turned into a line that haunted him. At his next public event, a reporter jokingly asked if he planned to tell more native Texans to leave their own state. The press laughed, but Abbott's strained smile said it all. The episode confirmed a basic lesson in politics. In today's social media age, genuine, unscripted moments can carry more influence than millions spent on advertising. Crockett's measured, steady response in the face of Abbott's outburst gave voters a clear sense of who each of them really was. Even months later, political writers were still referring back to the Abbott-Crockett exchange as a textbook case of how quickly the balance of power can shift. Abbott walked into that meeting confident that he was fully in control, but walked out looking like the kind of politician many Texans were starting to grow tired of. Crockett, on the other hand, offered a glimpse of what a different future might look like in Texas politics: younger, more diverse, and unwilling to back down from those in power. She represented a rising group of leaders, focused on their communities rather than big donors. The question now was whether this moment would be a short-lived viral clip or the start of a serious shift in Texas politics. Given the continued national interest in both figures and the growing conversation about the state's direction, it appeared this meeting might go down as the point when things truly began to change. What this showdown revealed is simple. The strongest political moments come not from staged speeches, but from unscripted encounters that show the true character of the people in power. Jasmine Crockett's steady and skilled response to Greg Abbott's outburst did more than just win her at that moment. It gave the entire nation a clear view of what effective leadership truly looks like. If you found this analysis of one of the most remarkable political moments in recent times valuable, be sure to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more sharp and insightful political coverage. Turn on the notification bell, so you are always updated when we break down the events shaping the future of American politics. What is your take on Crockett's reaction? Share your thoughts with us in the comments section below.